This is breaking news.
Mayor de Blasio is giving an update on the coronavirus pandemic in New York City. Let's go to it now.
He said, I at least want you to know, even though we had a tough night, he said, I'm looking at something very positive. There's a lot of young people out here cleaning up. They're out here because it's their community, out here cleaning up the damage that was done by a very negative few who don't represent the Bronx, don't represent that neighborhood, don't represent this city. And he said they were cleaning up. He said, it's good to see young people who care about their community or doing something positive. So I said, well, for a president, what organization are they with? Who organized? He said, let me find out. Hold on a moment. He reaches out. He's got a couple of the young people there. He says, hey, excuse me, which organization are you from? And the kids say to him, we're not from any organization. We live here. And these young people, this is their neighborhood, and they are the future of the Bronx, and they are the future of New York City. There are so many good young people in this city who I want to tell, all of them, all the youth of New York City who care about your neighborhoods, care about the city, care about creating a better world, care about creating a more just world. Thank you. Thank you to these young people in the Bronx who wanted to create something positive even in the midst of a crisis and a challenge. They wanted to move their neighborhood forward. So, look, it's an example to us all. And then I went to the scene yesterday myself later on in the day. I met with store owners who had had their stores looted, and I heard their stories, and these are hard-working people. People epitomize the heart and soul of New York City. It's a primarily Latino community. Some people own stores were immigrants. Some grew up in the area. But what they had in common was working people who had created something to serve their own community. And I talked to a lot of store owners in their stores. And I asked them what they were feeling, and they were angry, they were frustrated, they needed help. And then every single one of them said, but we will rebuild and we will come back, and we're not going anywhere. And I want you all to hear that, because that is the spirit of the Bronx and that is the spirit of New York City. We're not going anywhere. I was in a neighborhood that went through such tough times decades ago, and a lot of people I was with yesterday, elected officials, community leaders, store owners, everyday people in the community, referenced how tough it had been in the Bronx a few decades ago, and yet they stood their ground, and they brought the Bronx back, and they will do it again. So this is a setback, but it's not anything that will change the heart and soul of the people of the Bronx or the people of this city. Last night, we took a step forward in moving out of this difficult period we've had the last few days and moving to a better time. Just got off the phone with Commissioner Shea and First Deputy Commissioner Dean Foulahan. I want to thank both of them. We have all been talking constantly over these last 6 days. Both of them have shown tremendous leadership in the midst of this crisis. We went over the facts of last night. We saw a very, very different picture around New York City last night. We still have more work to do. Let me affirm that right up front. We saw peaceful protests during the day. Yeah, some tense moments, undoubtedly, but overwhelmingly peaceful protest, and the NYPD respecting the peaceful protest. We saw a few incidents where people decided to do something illegal or violent around the protest, but that was rare. We saw some acts in different boroughs of people attempting to attack property. NYPD was positioned to address that rapidly. We'll get the exact details out as we get more information in the course of the day, but overwhelmingly it was a very different reality in New York City last night. And the areas that had been particularly affected in Midtown Manhattan and in part of the Bronx the night before did not see that kind of activity in any meaningful number last night. So, a step forward. And working closely with Commissioner Shea and his team, a series of strategies were employed yesterday And those strategies, I think, by and large, were effective. Those strategies were created in light of the evidence of what happened from 9 p.m. Sunday through Monday night. Again, things we had not seen previously. Adjustments were made. NYPD really stepped back yesterday morning and said, okay, we're dealing with something different here. We have to defend differently. We have to address it differently. And they did. I want to thank the commissioner and his team, and I want to thank the men and women of the NYPD. They've been asked to do a lot the last few days. A lot of them are exhausted from working so hard, but they are going out there doing their job, protecting all of us, and showing a lot of restraint in the process. And that's what we expect. I want to be clear. Everyone who puts on that uniform takes an oath, agrees to a higher calling, and agrees that restraint will be a part of their life. And keeping the peace means every sense of those words. That's what our officers and their commanders understand. So we expect a lot of police officers. We expect them to live up to the highest standards of our society. And I saw a lot of good last night, and I want to see that continue. So I emphasize that the standards, the rules we put in place last night, the curfew beginning at 8 p.m. and going on till 5 a.m. the next morning, that will be in place, including Sunday night to 5 a.m. Monday morning. At that point, we hope to lift the curfew, move forward just as we're starting phase one of our restart. And the additional restrictions we put in place regarding transportation, we're going to keep all of those in place tonight. I anticipate keeping all of them in place throughout the week. We'll look at that carefully. We might make some adjustments along the way. I do want to say to anyone who was inconvenienced, I am sorry that happened, but it was in the name of addressing a bigger problem. And it's the right thing to do for just a few days as we address this situation and move forward. And we all now need to turn our attention to the hugely important moment coming this Monday, June 8th, where we take phase one of the restart. We've got to understand, all of us, as important as the issues that are being addressed in the last few days are, the single most important thing happening right now in New York City is the battle against the coronavirus. Single most important thing is to help people be healthy and safe. And right after that is restarting our city, helping people get their livelihoods back. I told you when I was out on the streets of this city in central Brooklyn on Sunday, I talked to a lot of everyday people. They're definitely concerned about bigger issues of justice for sure, but their number one concern overwhelmingly was their economic reality and what they're suffering through in this horrible economic crisis related to the coronavirus. The number two concern was the health and safety of their families. We need to get back to that focus. So let's realize that together, actually, all of you have done an amazing job of fighting back this disease, and now we got to go finish that job, and we got to restart for the good of all. So let's talk about that. We're only able to go to phase one because of everything you guys have done. And I want to remind people, notwithstanding what we've been through in the last few days, I want people to stay home to the maximum extent possible. I want people to practice social distancing very, very consistently. I want people wearing those face coverings all the time. It's imperfect, I know. Weather's getting warmer. But get back to it because it has been working and we need it to beat back this disease. 5 days to get ready for phase one. And phase one, to me, is yes, about getting people's livelihoods back, restarting the economy, but it's also first and foremost health and safety. We got to do it the smart way and the safe way. So, for people to be able to get back to work, for people to be able to participate again, comes down to the ability to get around. And we know this is a mass transit city. There is no way in the world New York City functions without mass transit. When we get past this crisis, I want us to see us to be even more of a mass transit city. I want there to be a day where people rarely use an automobile in this city. But for now, in this crisis, we have to deal with the immediate reality. And that means that people at least need to know that when they get on that subway car, they get on that bus, it is safe, and there are rules, and it's clean, and everyone knows how to approach it. We do know ridership went deeply down, 90% reduction at the height of the coronavirus crisis. But now people are going to be coming back, and they need to know they're going to be safe. So we've had conversations now for days. A lot of us at City Hall have been talking to folks at the MTA about how do we do this right. I had a very good conversation a few days ago with the head of the MTA, Pat Foy. Constructive conversation. We've offered ideas to the MTA about what we think will make it work better, and we want to partner with the MTA to get it done. So, yesterday, I put out a vision of what I believed would help us come back safely in terms of our subways and buses. And I know the MTA also released a plan that showed, I think, some very real progress. They are looking to do something we need to do, get that service levels, get the frequency of the trains and buses up to where it would be during normal times, because that's going to mean enough opportunity to get around, but also that when you get on a subway or bus, much greater likelihood it will not be crowded. I wanted to see hand sanitizer in all stations. They're doing that. I think that's great. I appreciate that. And they're going to do a great effort to get face coverings out. We've already pledged we will provide 1 million face coverings. The city of New York will provide 1 million face coverings. Working with the MTA for free to New Yorkers, we want to make sure it's always easy to have that face covering on. Now, there's more to be done, though. There's more to be done because that alone won't get the job done. There has to be presence on the platforms, personnel there to educate people, remind them, make sure they're staying safe. We want to work with the MTA to get this done. So here's some things I'm proposing I want to see the MTA take the next steps on. I want to see that everywhere you go, whether it is in a subway station and on the platform or on the train or on a bus, there are markings telling you exactly where to be. If you're waiting in line to get a Metro card from the machine, here's the marking showing you where to stand in line if there's a line. If you're on the platform, here's the markings telling you exactly where you can stand with enough distance from the person next to you. If you're on the subway, here's how many people should be on that train, on that car, and the markings of where you should stand or sit. The same with the buses. It is crucial that every other seat be blocked off so that it's clear you never end up sitting right next to someone. There's at least a seat between people. I think it's clear that we need stated public capacity limits on buses and on trains. Some, as I understand it, some subway cars are different from others in terms of capacity. Great, but let's have the number very clear to everyone. This subway car can handle whatever number it is of people, no more. This bus, this number of people, no more, while we're going through this crisis. Everyone can make sense of that. Everyone can visualize that. Those common sense standards and the personnel to back it up. If a train's crowded, the personnel there to say, hey, don't get into this car. The next car is pretty empty. Go down to that one. Or to know when to say, we don't want any more people getting on this train right now. We want the train to go by this station until another one comes that's less crowded. Those kind of adjustments will make a lot of difference. And then people will see it and feel it, and they will feel safe. And I know New Yorkers, if you experience it, if you see it with your own eyes, and you know it's safe, you'll get back on the train, and that's going to help us all move forward. Now, as we are surging forward to Monday, June 8th, the other big piece of the equation is to protect our health and our safety with a strong test and trace plan. Now, we've been talking about this for days. I want to emphasize, there's a handoff I keep talking about. Just as you start to reopen, test and trace moves forward in a huge new effort. That means more and more New Yorkers being tested all the time. Anyone tests positive gets the help they need. If they need to be in a safely separated place, they need to be in a hotel, or if they need help isolating at home, anyone who needs to be quarantined has that support. This approach is the offense to keep pushing back this disease, just at the point where more and more people might come in contact with each other. So yesterday we announced we're now going to a stance where testing will be available. It's still not in the number we want it to be by any stretch of the imagination, but it's going to keep growing. We're coming up now towards about 30,000 tests per day. I want us to get to 50,000 tests per day soon and keep growing from then. But here's the bottom line. Testing is free. I want every New Yorker to understand it. Your testing will be provided to you for free. It will be easy. It will be quick. And now my message is all New Yorkers are welcome to come and get these tests. We've talked before about the different priorities. We've talked before about people who had pre-existing conditions or were older. We've talked about our first responders, our healthcare workers, people who work in our nursing homes. All those folks, it was crucial to focus on them first while we had a very limited supply of testing. Now we have a lot more. All New Yorkers are now welcome to come forward, get tested for free. To find out where, you can go to nyc.gov/COVID test, or you can call 311. We now have over 180 sites, and that will be growing rapidly as we move forward. Also, testing is combined with tracing. Someone tests positive, who are the people you've been in close contact with the last few days? We're going to now reach out to them. We're going to get them tested. If they need help, if they need to safely separate from other people, we'll do that. Now that army of tracers we've been talking about, by the end of this week, there will be 2,500 tracers on duty, 2,500. And we'll be adding more the following week, another 1,200. So this number is growing all the time. I've said we are prepared to get to as many as 5,000 to 10,000 tracers. They're going into duty right now. And here's the bottom line. If you test positive, you will get a call from a tracer. You need to take that call. I want to emphasize how important this is. If you test positive, you're going to get that call, take that call, tell them about your close contacts. That's how we protect people. That's how we protect your family and every family. That call will come within about 24 hours of the time that you are tested, 24 to 36 hours. Crucial that we then follow through. We do that right. I'll make this point simple. You do that right, we do that right. We find everybody who needs support, and they get support, and the disease has nowhere to go. If people who need to be safely separated from everyone else, if we do that effectively, then other people won't catch the disease, and we contain it, and we slowly constrain it more and more to the point that we can eradicate it eventually. That is the name of this game. Let me talk to you about our thresholds, our indicators that we talk about each day to tell you where we are and how well you have done. And congratulations, because today you will see how well you have done. I've said that we have 3, and the first is the daily number of people admitted to hospitals for suspected COVID-19. We need to stay under 200 people per day in all of New York City, city of over 8 million people. So long as there's fewer than 200 going into the hospitals in a day, we think we're okay, we can make it work, we can protect people. Today, the lowest number I've seen, 39 patients only, 39 for all of New York City went into the hospital for this day. 39 only. That is a tremendous positive indicator. Now, we've said there's a threshold for number 2, the daily number of people in our health and hospitals ICUs. Need to keep that under 375. It's taken a while to get that down, but now we are there, 355. For the last few days, we've been under that threshold, and we intend to stay under that threshold. And percentage of people who tested citywide for COVID-19 tested positive, again, got to stay under 15% to know that we can make sure that we can handle people's health and safety needs. Again, best number we've seen so far, 4%. Even with more and more testing, only 4% testing positive. So this is really, really a very, very powerful evidence of everything you've achieved. This has been a tough game plan. It's required a lot of discipline. People have stuck to the plan, and now you see the fruits of your labors. A few words in Spanish. Hasta en un momento difícil, los neoyorquinos nos unimos como siempre hemos hecho. Hemos mostrado que nos podemos juntar para hacer cosas grandes. Hemos combatido el virus y pronto vamos a comenzar el reinicio. Tenemos que seguir en la lucha contra la injusticia y usarla como momento para lograr cambio que dure. With that, we will turn to our colleagues in the media. Please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
Hi all, just a reminder, we have Police Commissioner Shea, President and CEO of Health and Hospitals, Dr. Katz, and Executive Director of the Test and Trace Corps, Dr. Long, on the phone. With that, I will start with Juliet from 1010 Wins.
Oh, hi. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you today?
I'm all right, Juliet. How are you?
I'm okay, and thank you for coming on with us last night. Much appreciated. So my questions are, the MTA wants the city to provide volunteers to help with the social distancing efforts. Is that something you'll provide? And what are your plans for a possible influx of cars into Manhattan? And the other part of this is, with the city ready to reopen with a curfew, many commuters come into work during the early morning hours. And with places they are working at still boarded up or repairing damage, how are they going to get in there and get to work?
Okay, the curfew point, and say the first part one more time, Juliet. The first part of your question?
The first part, the MTA has asked the city to provide volunteers to help with social distancing efforts. So is that something you'll be doing? And what about the possibility that more cars are coming into the city?
Yep, thank you very much. Very good questions, Juliet, and I appreciate it. So, more cars. Yes, I do believe there will be more cars for a period of time. As I said, that's not our future. That won't work for our future in terms of congestion, in terms of health, in terms of fighting global warming. That can't be our future. But in the short term, do I believe people will use their cars more or for-hire vehicles more in the next few months of transition? Yes, I do. And we can handle that because we're going in phases. Obviously, there's so many fewer people moving around than usual. There's so many fewer people going to work. We can handle that in the short term. But the real point here is to get the MTA back up and running, to show people it's safe, to steadily increase the number of people who feel comfortable going on the subways and buses, obviously all at the same time continuing social distancing. And that's not forever, Juliet. I think it's really important to remind people this is a time-limited crisis. If we do our work together, all of us as New Yorkers, as one team, we will keep pushing back this disease and have the ability to open up more and more and get all of our transit options back to the fullest. So I believe we can make that work. But in the short term, we know that because phase one only involves certain types of work, our prediction is between 200,000 and 400,000 people are going to come back to work starting Monday. But remember, right before this crisis hit, we had over 4.5 million people working in New York City. 4.5 million people working in this city. Highest level of employment in the history of New York City was back in January and February. Now you have a huge percentage of people working from home, and thank God they're still working, but working from home, I'm sure that will continue for months ahead. And phase one, again, is only one part of the economy. So we can handle the initial adjustments. Yes, we will work with the MTA. I want to be helpful to them. I know they've asked for us to help get some staffing together. Absolutely want to find a way to do that. We want to work collegially. We did something very good in the cleaning initiative together, the overnight cleaning. That's been working very powerfully. We want this to work as well. So we will help them. We're going to give the 1 million face coverings for free. And if we need to do more, we'll do more. We'll help them with personnel. I think we can all work together. I do want to say to the MTA, it is crucial to put those markings in place and give people clear guidance. New Yorkers, I've been watching, how many places with a supermarket, a grocery store, someone just put masking tape on the street to say, here's how the line should form. And people have been forming the line that way. They just need some guidance. So if we do that in the subway, if we do it on the platform, if we do it in the subway car, on the bus, I think we'll all be better off and it will help everyone. So we need the MTA to do that. And then on the curfew, Juliet, we're going to end it as per now. We're going to watch every single day, but the plan is Sunday night into Monday morning, 5 a.m. Monday morning, curfew comes off. I'd like us never to have to use it again if we can do things right. And then we go right into the reopening. So folks who are working on their stores right now to get ready for the reopening, they're going to be doing that during daytime hours. From 5 a.m. to 8 p.m., people are moving about as normal. That's plenty of time for folks who are working on their stores. I'm sorry that there'll be an additional challenge for those who might be having to do some repairs right now because of that bad couple of nights. But I know they can get it done. And remember who's coming up for this next phase. construction, manufacturing, wholesale, and retail that can do curbside pickup and pickup in the store. That combination, I think those industries will be able, they've gotten a lot of warnings since we announced last Friday, the governor and I, that this was happening. They've gotten a lot of warning to get ready. New Yorkers are resourceful. I have great confidence people will be ready.
Next, we have Bridget from WNYC.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions for you and for Commissioner Shea. First, we saw a lot of videos from last night showing the NYPD detaining people on the streets, sometimes for seemingly no reason, including essential workers and journalists. On Sunday, Commissioner Shea said there were about 6 incidents of potential police misconduct under investigation. I'm wondering what the number is now and if any of those officers are still allowed to police protests while under investigation. And then my second question is related to some of those people who have been detained, many of them for low-level offenses that could have been dealt with by summons. That means they're in crowded jail cells during the pandemic. I'm wondering what's being done to ensure the safety of those detained and why officers aren't consistently wearing face coverings.
Yeah. Okay, Bridget, I'm going to have to say I respect you a lot. We know each other a long time. That's a lot of questions, and they are very important and good questions, but I really feel like you went by the ground rule there. So I'm going to adjust your questions a bit. And please, to all the journalists, we're trying to be fair here. Just ask 2 real questions. They'll be good for everyone, and everyone else gets their chance. And then all of us need to get back to work, which we are doing nonstop here. No journalist should ever be detained, ever. Unless there's an absolutely aberrant situation where a journalist commits an illegal act, there should be no condition under which any journalist is ever detained by the police of this city or any city in the United States of America, period. It's in our Constitution, the freedom of the press. It must be honored. It should never be anything that compromises that. So anytime a journalist is in any way treated inappropriately, I want that investigated by the NYPD immediately, and I want to make sure there are ramifications for that. We absolutely believe in the right to protest. I think we've shown it and said it 1,000 times, and we're going to continue to. Essential workers should not in any way, shape, or form be stopped from going to their work. That's very clear. If there's any instance like that, I want to know about it. I assume sometimes that's just based on a lot of activity and people trying to make sense of a complex situation. But the bottom line is, if you're an essential worker, you're not supposed to be stopped. You just have to clarify where you're going and why, and the police will understand that. Any officers who are under investigation will not be present during protests. I can say that very clearly. I've had this conversation with the commissioner. If an officer is under investigation, those investigations from now on are going to go faster. We're going to have faster results. But one thing is for certain. If an officer has done something that has led to serious questions about their conduct, they're going to be pulled immediately away from protest duty while that discipline is determined. And I want to see it determined quickly. I want it to be fair to all involved, but it must be quickly. And then obviously, we must do everything safely. So I understand the complexities everyone is facing, but I would like to see every New Yorker with a face covering on at all times. I don't like it. You don't like it. It's no fun, especially when it's hot out. Everyone needs to have a face covering on. Everyday New Yorkers, protesters, police, everyone needs to have a face covering on. And we want to make sure everyone is safe. And people will be detained if they do something inappropriate. And we saw in the last few days people do things inappropriate, people do things violent, people attack property, attack police officers. Anyone who does that is going to be detained. Anyone who's out after the curfew and cannot prove that they are there for essential work reasons is subject to being detained. We're going to follow through on those rules. That's the way I've made clear to the NYPD. I expect people to handle things, but I want to make sure everyone's safe. So we certainly will look at, I'll ask First Deputy Mayor Fullahan to follow up with the commissioner on the situation with anyone who's detained to make sure we're putting the right measures in place for the health and safety of all. Commissioner, you want to add anything?
No, I think you hit everything. The only issue that was a long question that I didn't hear was the summons versus arrest. wherever appropriate, we issue summonses in lieu of arrest. We've obviously done a lot of both summonses and arrests. And then on the point of the only thing I'll add on the point of the press, it's doing the best we can in a difficult situation. We 100% respect the rights of the press. Unfortunately, we've had some people purporting to be press that are actually lying, if you could believe that. So sometimes these things take a second to, maybe too long, to sort out. I could think of a case with the Wall Street Journal recently. I was just made aware of yesterday. They wrote me a very nice letter, and I'll be calling them just to apologize. So we're not perfect. We do the best we can in the situation, and whether it's essential workers or press, the reality is, though, as the mayor said, chaotic situations at times. A lot of people obviously know what to say, and they're lying at times. So sometimes these things take a few moments to sort out. But if we can improve in areas, we'll improve.
Next, we have Gloria from New York 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask you, I know that we saw a big decrease last night in the number of incidents, in the number of looting incidents, but I wanted to see if there's anything more you could say about who these people are. A lot of the video shows young men, what appear to be groups of young people. And I want to know what happened to the work that the NYPD was supposed to be doing to engage with young people. What can you give them as hope as we go into the summer season with a possibility of a budget that might cut education and programs? And my second question, Mr. Mayor, is about these calls that we're hearing about defunding the NYPD. Both of my questions are sort of related. Do you think it's time to take a second look at how the NYPD is funded, and that there needs to be more of an emphasis on young people and making sure that they can safely get through this summer in the next couple of months?
Yeah. Thank you, Gloria. So, I'm going to just start with a little remembrance that it's interesting. Commissioner Shea and I did not know each other in the year 1991, but our lives were on a parallel track. He joined the police force and was stationed in the South Bronx, and he, for the first time, experienced policing in an incredibly difficult atmosphere. It was one of the years over 2,000 murders. I was working here at City Hall, starting out my work in public service. And right around then, at a point where the city was so violent, and I give a lot of credit to Mayor Dinkins, I give a lot of credit to Speaker Peter Vallone. They got together and they said, we've got to do something different. They said, we need to both increase the number of police officers on the street, and we have to focus on youth programming. The initiative called Safe Streets, Safe City. And Safe Streets, Safe City, then in the early 90s, which required the support of the state legislature, and it required funding, did both those things together, Gloria. Increased the police force and created the beacon programs that had such a big impact in terms of giving young people a positive opportunity. The plan was called Safe Streets, Safe City. The subtitle was Cops and Kids. The truth of that in the early 90s is still true today. On recent weeks, I've had the opportunity to speak to Mayor Dinkins and speak to Speaker Vallone, two exemplary public servants. Their contribution is often forgotten, and it shouldn't be, because they helped set us on the path to becoming the safer city we did over the following quarter century. But I tell you this for a reason. I think there's been a lot of police leaders, a lot of police reformers from within the police profession who long ago came to the conclusion that a focus on youth was the only way forward. A positive focus on youth was the only way forward. I believe in that fundamentally. And that investments in youth programs are just as crucial to public safety as what we do with traditional policing. So we have to figure out how to do both. Now, over these last days, we've asked a lot of the men and women of the NYPD. We've asked them to do extraordinarily difficult work while many of them have been put in danger, and we've asked them to show consistent restraint no matter what is said or done to them, and they have done that overwhelmingly. And again, anytime anyone does not live up to their oath or does not live up to the standards of the profession, that higher calling, we are going to make sure there are appropriate consequences. But I really want to put things in perspective. 36,000 men and women, the vast, vast majority of whom have done exactly what we asked of them in recent days. I want to thank the men and women of the NYPD for that. Now, how do we move forward? Commissioner Shea, I said we started around the same time. He said some things in the last months about youth-focused policing that were profound. He has said things in his tenure that, if you listen carefully, are about entirely reshaping the approach of policing, which has already been altered deeply in the city because of neighborhood policing, and going even farther, with a focus on helping young people. He has said this, he laid out the plan, and this plan would have been deeply implemented right now had it not been for a global pandemic. But the plan is clear. NYPD, through neighborhood policing, deep in communities, talking with young people, talking with their families. If a young person starting on a difficult path or an inappropriate path, move in cooperatively with the family, help get that kid the support they need, whether it's mental health services, whether the kid needs help at school, whatever it is, family needs support. The idea is proactive, preventative, positive. That's what Commissioner Shea has laid out, and that is the future of policing in New York City, and that is what we will be able to get back to as soon as we can take a few more steps forward in fighting back this pandemic. So that's where we're going to be going. The hope for young people, and I showed you the photos of those young people in the Bronx. Gloria, you and I can talk, Commissioner can talk, but that's the actual on-the-ground reality. Young people who are our hope, who already are showing such responsibility, such ownership of their communities. We need to foster that and support that. We have a challenge in these next weeks as we go into the summer, both how do we physically do it while we're still dealing with a pandemic, and also how do we pay for it? We're in the worst fiscal crisis this city has seen in generations. The answer is we need the stimulus in Washington, which, Gloria, I don't know if the stimulus is more or less likely because of the events of the last few days in this country, but if anyone in the White House or the Congress is paying attention, this is even more of a reason to have a stimulus, because people are hurting. They're hurting because of injustice. They're also hurting because of poverty, because of economic injustice as well. So the stimulus would allow us to move forward and find the right way to support our youth, even with the healthcare restrictions. We need that capacity to borrow from Albany. It's made all the more pertinent by the events of the last days. We're going to work for both those things in the month of June. If we get that, we're going to be able to do a lot more for young people. If we don't get that, we're going to be in a horrible, horrible situation where we're going to be having to cut back city government across the board. And that's not going to help anyone. So, Gloria, I am purposeful about fighting in Washington for the stimulus, fighting in Albany for the borrowing capacity, only to use as a last resort. But we've got to have some resources of some kind, or else we will not be able to provide services and we will not be able to support our young people the way they deserve. So, final point I'd make, I understand, I don't mean to make light of this, but I'm reminded of the song Imagine by John Lennon. We played it at my inauguration. I think everyone who hears that song in its fullness thinks about, what about a world where people got along differently? What about a world where we didn't live with a lot of the restrictions that we live with now? But we're not there yet. We are making a lot of progress, I truly believe. I believe the protest movements themselves, the peaceful protest, is the essence of how we make progress. The reforms made within the NYPD are progress, deep progress. But for folks who say defund the police, I would say that is not the way forward. At some point in our history, we may be in a very different situation. But right now, and I use that analogy from the early 90s, having a police force that is able to keep everyone safe and able to engage at the community level, having a police force strong enough to do the work of public safety, but also the work of building community with people and healing, I think that's necessary for now. So I understand the impulse, but I think the impulse misses the reality we're facing right now. And look, I am hopeful we can bring these strands together, and I'll conclude with this point. I'm hopeful we can bring these strands together powerfully. I really am. We need a different approach. We need a host of additional reforms in policing. We need people to believe that there will be transparency, that there will be actual discipline and consequences when someone does something wrong, and it will be swift. We need to make sure the right police leadership is in the right place in our communities. We have a lot of things we can do differently and better, and we will do them aggressively. And we need to get to Commissioner Shea's vision of youth policing, because that will be transcendent. That will take us to a whole nother place. And we can do that. So all of these things, I think, can be brought together in a very, very positive manner if we have some resources to work with. If we don't, Gloria, it's a very, very difficult situation. But I'm going to keep believing in New York City, believing in our people, believing in the NYPD. I also believe in community leadership. One of the things you've seen the last few days is community leadership coming forward, owning the space, owning their neighborhoods, rejecting violence, rejecting looting, rejecting anyone who wants to attack officers or property. The Cure Violence movement, I think, is one of the most hopeful things we've seen in this city in recent years. People from the community, including some people who had lost their way, who become change agents, who become peacemakers, mediators, community voices. That's the future of this city.
Next, we have Julia from the Post.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Shea, and everyone else on the call. First question for the mayor and the commissioner. Could you give us a detailed sketch of the looters over the last couple of days? Where are they coming from? Kind of what their size is? Are there different groups? We heard from a high-ranking law enforcement source that they're using stolen out-of-state U-Hauls to transport the pilfered merch. And then secondly, for you, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering about the impact of the looting over the last few days on the city. Some small business owners, including some in the Bronx, are saying that the pandemic in combination with the damage and theft will force them to close forever. The downtown shopping districts say it will delay the reopening. We saw Saks spending $16,000 to protect their store with armed guards and razor wire. What's your message to those business owners, and do you regret your administration couldn't protect them better?
Julia, I believe that all of us in City Hall, everyone at the NYPD, used every tool that was right to use in this atmosphere and looked at the big picture of what happened in this city and in this country from Thursday night through Sunday night. Again, up until Sunday night around 9 p.m., no serious instance of any looting in New York City, even if we saw it elsewhere. Things changed on Sunday night. We made an adjustment for Monday, saw something really troubling Monday night, made a much deeper adjustment, and you saw a very different reality on Tuesday night, and that's where we're going to hold. So I believe that for all of us who actually do this work, who are here at the front line making these decisions every single day, I believe we acted on the information we had, made adjustments. Of course, we would have loved to have been able to see what was going to happen and to have the intelligence information to know that something like that was going to happen in a way we could act on even earlier. Of course. But I look at the big picture all the time. And I think it's hard. Honestly, seriously, I do. I don't blame anyone who's looking at the day-to-day or the hour-to-hour. That's very human. It's certainly the reality that media has to deal with. I understand that. My job is not to think just about the day-to-day and the hour-to-hour, but to think about the whole city all the time, today, tomorrow, the future, and here's what I see. Starting on Thursday, we had a national crisis, a historic and painful national crisis. Our job was to keep the peace in the city. Our job was to ensure that there was no loss of life. Our job was to ensure that even if there was tensions between police and protesters, there would be peaceful protest honored and respected. Our job was to show people that policing would be restrained, but still effective. And then when we saw something that we really don't have a lot of history of in recent generations in this city, that organized looting, then it was our job to figure out strategies that will work without forgetting about everything I said previously. We were not going to miss the fact that we still had to keep a peaceful dynamic in the city. We still had to respect the views and rights of people expressing themselves. We could not create a counter mistake, trying to solve one problem, creating a new problem. We had to strike a balance. Commissioner Shea and I talked about this incessantly. And as I said, First Deputy Mayor Dean Fullahan, thank him for all the work he's done. I want to thank Chief Terry Monahan, Chief Fausto Pichardo. We have all been talking constantly and making those adjustments. That's what leaders do. I'm confident that as we gain more information, more intelligence was gathered, more sense of the specifics that you referred to at the beginning of your question, that we saw the pattern of what was happening, that the adjustments were made. Last night showed me something very different. We're going to stay with this strategy through the week. I want to emphasize the vast majority of people who have been out these last 6 days have been peaceful. A small number of people aim to do violence towards police, particularly that kind of anarchist group, and some of whom, as we said, come from outside. Certainly many of whom are protesting in communities that they're not from. And then a organized group of criminals doing things like looting for pure financial gain, pure criminal gain, nothing to do with protest whatsoever. No cause, just plain old crime. And they will be dealt with. Final point on the small business, then we'll turn to the Commissioner. I feel for every business that has gone through these last few days. We want to help businesses come back. I talked to the store owners in the Bronx. I said, we're going to find ways to help you. And again, respectfully, Julia, for all the folks who spend a lot of time trying to tear down New York City, I'm not going to let you tear down New York City. So you can try, but you will fail. Those store owners want to come back. Every time you want to tell the story of what's wrong with New York City, I'm going to tell the story of what's right with New York City. And every time you want to ignore the everyday working people of the city who believe in the city, who fought through stuff you couldn't even imagine in the South Bronx in the 1980s. And I talked to people about it yesterday. I talked to the borough president. I talked to the councilman. I said, I've asked, we had a group of community leaders in a room. I said, how many of you were here in the 80s? People raised their hand. I saw the South Bronx in the 80s. What they went through night before last was horrible, but they went through 100 times worse and came back from it because they're that tough, they're that resilient, they care about their community, they will come back. So the vast majority of those small businesses will come back, and we will help them come back. Anyone who can't, especially because of the blow of the coronavirus, it saddens me deeply. But all of this comes from the coronavirus creating this dynamic for all of us, and we're all going to have to find our way through as best possible, and the city of New York will do all we can to help them. But if you're asking about the will of the business owners to come back, the vast majority have the will to stand and fight, I assure you. Commissioner? On the composition, on the composition of the looters, what you've learned about the looters in particular.
Yeah, Julia, what we've seen over the last 3 nights is, again, people taking advantage of a situation. I think I draw a line of distinction between the protests, overwhelmingly peaceful, and some people trying to disrupt that and cause mayhem. And then when you get into the looters, I draw a distinction between the protests and the looting. These are people taking advantage. We've seen a lot of people, as you mentioned an incident that I would consider isolated with the U-Haul truck. That did happen. We see a number of vehicles to transport stolen property, to scout locations out, to transport people to commit these crimes. So vehicles is not rare. The U-Haul truck aspect is more of an aberration. And we also see a lot of people just peeling off, using the protests as cover, and then peeling off and, unfortunately running around and doing some looting. In terms of where those specific people are coming from, they tend to be from New York City. We've seen a lot of people from Brooklyn. We've seen a lot from the Bronx coming south to Manhattan. We've seen some looting a couple nights ago in the Bronx. There was a number of Bronx homegrown residents participating in that. And that's really what we've seen.
Next, we have Tom Winter from NBC.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Reviewing your transcript from Monday, you said a police officer should lose his badge and gun for pointing his gun at a protester. You said the video was, quote, unacceptable. Later video came out that showed seconds before the video that everybody was commenting on Monday, his commanding officer, a lieutenant, was attacked with a brick and fell to the ground beside him. Have you reconsidered your statement, and do you want to apologize to the NYPD?
Tom, I want to get all the facts. What I saw was very troubling. In the middle of a crisis like this, the last thing you want to see is a gun being pointed at protesters. But I believe there's always complexities to these situations. The commissioner and I have talked about it. He's seen more video now. I know we're going to talk about that in detail. I want to understand the whole picture. If I ever say something and then learn more and believe what I said was wrong, I'll always acknowledge that. I'll always say what I really believe is true. There's also a formal investigation process by the Internal Affairs Bureau. There's a formal disciplinary process with due process. But I have said throughout these days, I respect the men and women of the NYPD. I respect the work they're doing. I'm supporting it in every way I can. I'm talking to the commissioner all the time. Every strategic decision we are making jointly, and there's been tremendous consensus. If I see something troubling, I'm going to say it's troubling, but there's still, regardless of what I say, going to be an objective process to determine what's right and wrong.
Next, we have Rosa from the city.
Hi, I have two questions. One first from my colleague Yoav, who has a story on this today. Mr. Mayor, if you could speak to, be specific about the steps that you're going to take to improve internal discipline at the NYPD. You've said you're going to make it faster and better, but specifically how and why hasn't the NYPD fully implemented the 13 recommendations they committed to in February of last year? So that's my first question. My second question is for Mitch Katz and for the mayor. Are you modeling for a bump? In your modeling, do you see a bump, a spike after reopening? And what kind? And given that we're sending, you talk about
Rosa, I'm cutting you there, no disrespect. Again, guys, respectfully, two questions, two real questions, not two 12-part questions. So I'm going to just stop it right there. It's enough. We are absolutely modeling for multiple scenarios, Rosa. The problem is, and I think everyone would agree with this, the modeling to date, globally, nationally, state, local, has been really uneven because this is such a multifaceted crisis and medical science doesn't understand this disease and there's so many moving parts here. I have to say the modeling has often been off base, so we're doing our best with the modeling. But unquestionably, we are worried about the potential for any kind of resurgence of the disease. And I'm worried anytime people start to come in contact with each other. But on the other hand, these numbers show the disease has been beaten back so consistently for so long now, and people in the city take it so seriously, and they've done so much to beat it back. And on top of that, the test and trace, as you heard earlier, is coming on very, very strong, which is going to be a real strategic change to have that much more ability to reach people and deal with them and make sure they are not spreading the disease. So yes, we are prepared. If we see anything, what I've talked to Dr. Katz and Dr. Varma and Dr. Barbeau, we've all talked about the fact that this doesn't happen like flicking a switch. If we start to see a problem, we're going to see it over days and days. Most likely, if there's a problem, it will emerge over a period of at least a week or 2 weeks. So we're watching. You've seen the numbers have been consistently good, but if we see some spike beginning, then we're going to take additional steps. If we see too much, of course, God forbid, we could always stop moving to the next phase or even retreat to the previous phase. But I think the basic way to think about it is high level of discipline from New Yorkers. The initial industries that are opening come with certain advantage. Construction's mainly outdoors. Manufacturing, you can put some space. Wholesale, you can put some space. And the test and trace is going to be a huge counter push against the disease simultaneously. But we will be vigilant. On the question of NYPD, I will go back and look at the recommendations from last February and where we stand. I don't have that at my fingertips. If the commissioner wants to speak to that, he can, but we will certainly follow up on that. I believe, and I'm going to keep saying, I have eyes to see for 6.5 years how many consistent reforms we made. It may not matter, respectfully, to a number of people asking questions, to certain advocates or elected officials. It may not matter that for 6.5 years we've made a consistent series of changes while keeping crime down, but I know everyday New Yorkers. They want police reform, they want a different relationship between police and community, and they want crime kept down. That's a lot to combine, but the NYPD has done it under the leadership of Commissioner Shea, Commissioner O'Neill before him, Commissioner Bratton before him. They are all thoroughgoing reformers. I know them. To some extent, the public knows them, but the public doesn't know them the way I know them because I talk to all of these guys all the time and have when they were in their service of this city. These are individuals who devoted their lives to changing the nature of policing and making it more about the people served, period. So that work has gone on for 6.5 years. It's going to go a lot further in the next year and a half. I want to see the 50A repeal happen immediately in the month of June. I want to see a faster disciplinary process at the NYPD. I believe we can achieve that, and I'll provide whatever resources are needed for that. I want to see officers who are in the wrong place in the NYPD moved, and I want to see officers who should not be on the police force on the police force. I mean, off the police. Anyone who shouldn't be on, shouldn't be on. As simple as that. Anyone who needs to be removed should be removed. I don't think that's a lot. I think the vast majority of officers do their jobs well, listen to the training, have been practicing de-escalation, have been showing they understand and believe in neighborhood policing. So all of those things are going to happen. I don't have a doubt in my mind. And as we do that, plus the commissioner's vision of youth policing, which again, respectfully, he said he has said such incredibly powerful, moving things. He laid out a plan. I didn't see a lot of conversation about that. I think that's unfortunate. I hope when we start to implement that again as we fight back this crisis, I hope people will pay attention to what he's doing. And Commissioner, I'm going to ask you to jump in to speak to Rosa's question, but also I think the people in New York City right now need to hear again your vision of youth policing. You've said it a bunch of times, but maybe memories are short in this crisis. I don't blame people for that. Could we start by having you just define for a moment where you'd like to take the relationship between NYPD and young people?
So I'll begin with that, and then I'll finish with the discipline piece. You know, I've been around policing now nearly 30 years, and I've seen the good, the bad, and I've seen what works and what doesn't work. And what the mayor alluded to before was that where you look at where we've come from and all that we've done in this city, and have more to do, frankly, not just here, but across the country. When you look at what we've done with precision policing and reducing arrests, implementing neighborhood policing, reducing summonses and stops, having the lowest incarceration of any major city in this country, which is often not portrayed. It's put us, go back 6 months, a year, it's put us at a unique opportunity in time, I believe, to really build upon neighborhood policing, to really take that next step. And what I stated when I was appointed to police commissioner and believe wholeheartedly is that we have an incredible opportunity here to really reach down and to further neighborhood policing, to really build relationships and strengthen the commitment in neighborhoods, specifically with youth, because the youth are the future of this city. And doing everything we can, whether it's the Bronx, whether it's Brooklyn, whether it's Manhattan, Queens, or Staten Island, to reach out to kids of all races, of all economic conditions. And I'm not specifically talking about the kids that are in trouble here. I'm talking about the kids that don't get into trouble or could be on the cusp of trouble, and guiding them and giving them opportunities and building relationships with officers. What can we do better? What services do we have? Can we be the quarterback of all services? We obviously deal with kids that make mistakes. We obviously deal with kids that come from troubled relationships because we're already responding to those apartments. We're already going to the schools or taking missing persons reports when mothers call us and say, I don't know what to do with this kid. There is an incredible opportunity here, and it's not going to be an opportunity like many other things that is solved solely by the police, but we think we can really take the lead on this. Chauncey Parker, my Deputy Commissioner of Collaborative Policing, Nilda Hoffman, who's the Community Affairs Head, Juanita Holmes, who's in charge of school safety, were all put into positions specifically to guide us through this. And literally week one of the pandemic, we had 100 youth coordination officers selectively interviewed by the following preceding three executives, all with the same mindset of what we're looking for here, that recognize that there's many ways to police. Sometimes you police with handcuffs, sometimes you police with a hand and leading people and guiding them and mentoring them. And we specifically interviewed 100 youth coordination officers that had that exact same mindset, that came from the same communities and want to help. Remember, we're a minority majority police department. We have an incredible opportunity here. And in the first week of their training, which is incredibly upsetting to me, is when the pandemic hit and it was put on hold. And then you got into a situation where we're trying to think outside the box. How can we keep moving forward? And it was literally close to impossible when you have executive orders that are appropriate, that we can't meet. We can't have people outside on the streets. So, between working with partners, thinking outside the box, how do we engage with kids in this environment? The environment is constantly moving, but we still have put some things into place. We've done youth councils via Zoom. We've scheduled and worked with external partners, celebrities in some case, and asked them what they would do with us in terms of sports leagues online. I mean, we're still moving towards that, but that's the overall philosophy. We have to stop that pipeline that creates, and the pipeline is getting smaller and smaller, but with the precision piece, it's allowed us to really have an amazing opportunity here. If we could do more, stop that pipeline of people getting entangled into the criminal justice system. I mean, it's not going to be every single case. I think we all realize that, but there's a lot more that we could do here. On the discipline, I think that you're referring to the Blue Ribbon panel. Last year, I can't recite off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me. I can tell you that many of those things were put into place. In fact, the majority will be put into place. I think our biggest obstacle here is transparency and making sure we communicate to the public what is going on with investigations. We might not always see exactly eye to eye, but I think that most of the difficulties that we engage in can be cleared up with clear communication and explaining the why. In terms of the Blue Ribbon panel, I think it was overwhelmingly positively received, and many of the recommendations have already been put into place. Things such as transparency, things such as a uniform discipline system to make sure that there's no inequities. And I believe we posted some of that. So we're moving towards that.
Thank you. And I want to just add one more very quick point before the next question. Commissioner alluded to the reduction of arrest, the reduction of incarceration. Again, the facts are the facts and the progress is the progress. And I'm going to keep saying it. And everyday New Yorkers are experiencing it. And when I go into neighborhoods, people talk about it. They talk about it. I've had young people come up to me and say what it is like to no longer be stopped all the time and frisked all the time. I've had people talk to me about the fact they can see that there's many fewer arrests, that arrest is not the go-to all the time. Bill Bratton said this to me a long time ago. He said arrest is one tool of police officers. You train officers well, you give them discretion, you respect their professionalism. A lot of times they can get something done without ever resorting to an arrest. Therefore, what do we have now? We have, in the year 2019, we had 180,000 fewer arrests than the last year of the Bloomberg administration in 2013. 180,000 fewer arrests, and the city got safer. We're at the lowest level of incarceration in the city since the 1940s. These are real actions that affect real people. These are not symbolic actions. These are not actions that folks think make them feel good. These are actual changes that reach everyday people's lives. And that's what we're going to do more of.